Like, I'm sorry I'm taking this because or else when I go back to edit this thing, it's so hard to edit because I don't know where's up. Question number 4. The biblical flat earth and cosmic tree. Oh, this is gonna be good because a lot of Spanish speaking people are picking up on this flat earth craziness. And I don't know if you've seen, Ben, those things where you have there's the sun and there's a lot of all the planets and everybody is round except for the earth.
Yeah, yeah,
Young
yeah.
earth creationists teach, and remember, these are Matthias' questions. So Matthias, I don't think he likes young earth creationists. And remember, Matthias, he's an astronomer, um,
Oh,
by
really?
but he has a degree in astronomy. So
I did not know that.
yeah, well, yes, he's an astronomer. So he that's his title. Well, that's his not the title, but that he's an astronomer. Young earth creationists teach that the Old Testament teach of a spherical earth. You have talked about the cosmology of Old Testament authors regarding a flat earth with a solid dome as a sky. And this reminds me of The Simpsons did you ever see the dome? You know, the dome, that television show for a while, the dome.
I have not.
Yeah, I didn't see it. All I know about the Simpson movie. Could you expand on that and also about the lesser known cosmic tree motif, the cosmic tree? And this cosmic tree reminds me of Thor. So I want to see. I want to see what you have to talk about this.
Yeah, it's very similar, like
Yeah.
mythologically.
Mm.
But when I haven't published this yet, but I've written a book on Genesis, and at the end of it, in an appendix, just for fun, I went through an anthropological survey all over the world of what do traditional societies, ancient people believe about the physical cosmos, the construction of the world. And I found that with the exception of the Greeks and with the Chinese in the 200s AD, everybody believed that the Earth was flat. That's the natural way for people to conceive of the cosmos. And this is interesting because, particularly in the ancient Near East, so we know what the Egyptians believed, we know what the Babylonians believed, we know what other cultures surrounding Israel believed, and we have passages in the Bible where the exact same language is used, and it seems pretty clear that the ancient Israelites believed in a flat Earth. Obviously, I don't believe in a flat Earth. So you'll find a lot of videos on YouTube and that sort of thing where we'll be arguing for a flat Earth from the
Yes.
biblical text, because the biblical text actually is a flat Earth text. But the primary text, the one where I guess the discussion begins, where the debate begins, is Genesis chapter 1, verses 6 through 7.
Mm.
And God said, "Let there be a firmament." The Hebrew word here is rakia. It refers to like a hammered piece of metal, usually. God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it separate water from water." And God made the firmament and separated between the waters which were below the firmament and the waters which are above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament rakia, meaning he called it rakia, or Shemayim, heavens. And it was evening and morning a second day. So what's going on in this passage is you have God creating this. The creation account starts out with everything as darkness and watery. And God says, "Let there be light." And then the first thing that he creates after the light is this solid firmament, the rakia, which separates the waters which are above and below. So in ancient Israelite cosmology, as well as in ancient Near Eastern cosmology in general, so for example in Egypt and in Mesopotamia, the Earth exists inside this sort of cosmic void where there's water suspended up above the heavens by the sky dome, and then it surrounds us on all sides. And this connects with the imagery of Leviathan, by the way. But essentially, when we read the Bible in parallel with ancient Near Eastern creation texts, so in I mentioned in Enuma Elish, which is the Babylonian creation myth, the whole story is about how Marduk has to slay this watery chaos dragon named Tiamat, and then he splits her body in two. The top half, the text says that he lays over to make the dome of heavens, and then he uses the bottom half to create the earth. And then you have texts like the water is her blood, and from her eye sockets, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers flow out, and that sort of thing. So this is the same idea as ancient Israelite religion. Conceptually, of course, the mythology is a little bit different. But we also have Akkadian texts. One is called Car 307, which says pretty point blank that the sky is, it likens the sky to a type of Persian sky blue jasper stone. So again, you have this idea that the sky, it's a solid firmament. There's a text called, it's not a text so much as a depiction attached to a text. It's called the Tablet of Shamash, and it depicts the sky god Shamash sitting on his throne with some other deities. And there's a little portion of the text that talks about how he's sitting over the god Shamash is sitting over the watery firmament of heaven, and you can see in the depiction actually the firmament with stars embedded within it, and then you can see wavy lines representing water being held up above it. Beyond that, we also have Egyptian papyri, Egyptian tomb art, where it's quite clear, like, for example, you'll have the sun being depicted as it's ferried across the sky within a solar ship. We also have depictions where it's like the cosmos, creation, is shown as this bubble that exists inside of this essentially infinite void of water without it, like outside of it. And then one thing that I've created a video on YouTube that goes quite in depth into this is looking at how ancient Jews themselves interpreted the Bible. So we're talking about a little bit after the time of Jesus, a couple centuries before and after. Around that time, we have some pretty elaborate texts where Jews, like, point blank, they'll tell you what they believed about the heavens, how it was materially constructed, and none of them took an atmospheric view of the cosmos. They all interpret it as flat Earth. They all interpret it as, well, until they start being influenced by Hellenistic ideas, that is. But even after Hellenistic ideas, a lot of them still took the flat Earth cosmology because they thought, look, it's in my Bible. There's a text especially called Genesis Rabbah, it's a collection of Jewish traditions, where it contains in chapter 4 of Genesis Rabbah, there's a very extended discussion on how thick is the solid firmament, like how big is the ocean that's suspended above it, that type of thing. But you mentioned the cosmic tree motif. I wouldn't say that I'm incredibly detailed in my knowledge of the literature. I've read through it a couple of years ago, but it's essentially, it was this ancient Mesopotamian idea. It actually occurs cross-culturally. It's like the concept of a dragon. It's this idea of it's like the concept of a dragon, I mean, in the sense that it's a cross-cultural thing. The Mesopotamian cosmic tree, or the cosmic tree anthropologically, it's this idea of a tree with roots that reach down into Sheol, into hell. It has this trunk that goes through the second tier of cosmology, the earth, and then its branches reach up to heaven. And that's relevant in this discussion because in Babylonia, you have this thing. It's called the Meshu tree. And after the biblical authors, the ones that find themselves living after the Babylonian exile, they're familiar with this mythology, with this idea, and they'll reference it every now and then. So, for example, Ezekiel, who's sitting there in Babylon, he makes some references to the cosmic tree. You also have, most notably, Daniel chapter 4. Of course, Nebuchadnezzar's dream. He talks about, I slept and I dreamed and I saw this giant tree and it was visible from all the earth. That's interesting because in the text there seems to be this emphasis that everyone on earth could see this tree within this mythological archetype that Nebuchadnezzar was projecting in his dream. And then Daniel, he answers him and he's like, he's explaining the whole thing to him, and he just sort of accepts the same framework that Nebuchadnezzar's thinking with. He's on the same wavelength as Nebuchadnezzar. He doesn't correct his cosmology. The idea is, the earth is flat. So like if this thing was big enough, everybody on earth could see it. Everybody in the world could see it. All the nations could see it, which doesn't make sense within a modern cosmological framework. And I've read a fair bit about ancient Babylonian cosmology and astrology. This totally surprises people, throws them off, because they were such good astronomers. They were such good mathematicians. People don't realize at no point in their history did they ever discover that the earth isn't flat. And actually, I had a class it was a crash course really in Old Babylonian with a scholar named Cecile Michel, she's a French Assyriologist. She's actually, in 2014, she was the president of the International Association of Egyptologists. And I just asked her point blank, like, hey, is it true that the Babylonians thought that the earth was flat, like even with all their science and technology and how smart they were? And she's like, yep, they never figured it out. So obviously the ancient Israelites, at every level of analysis, which I've only given you one biblical text, but there's Michael Heiser. If you go online and look up Michael Heiser and cosmology, he'll give you the whole walkthrough of all the biblical texts that discuss the flat Earth cosmology in the Bible. Obviously, the ancient Israelites were less scientifically sophisticated than the Babylonians, and all throughout their history, they believed in a flat Earth as well, just as the Babylonians.